Hi there. Welcome to another installment of the Big Book Lectures. We're going to be doing 3 of the chapters in the book Alcoholics Anonymous tonight. Disclaimer again, my purpose in doing this isn't to proselytize for Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm not recruiting for it or saying bad things about it or any of that kind of stuff. Just discussion of what they're doing, where they came from, how the Big Book came to be, and how it fits into what we as professional counselors will be doing in the modern era. I am a recovering person. I did recover in Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous and Palmer Drug Abuse Program and Adult Children of Alcoholics. I've been to a lot of things, Al-Anon, and 12-step programs. So I do have a warm feeling for them. I appreciate them, and I think that they were instrumental in my recovery. But whether you agree with me on that or whether you don't, it's really not material. What is material is that these are resources that we can use with our clients, and because they may want to participate in it. And we may have clients who are coming to us from 12-step programs, and they'll expect us to know a little bit about that, to understand what they're doing in their 12-step recovery. And it is important that we do that. So consequently, I'm having you read the Big Book, and I'm just hitting on a few high points as we go along with these lectures that are hopefully helpful to you. Anyway, without further ado, we'll jump over here and take a look inside at what's going on. The chapters that you were to read tonight is There Is a Solution, More About Alcoholism, and We Agnostics. And so there is a solution. And the solution is a spiritual solution for a hopeless condition of mind and body that is expressed through obsession and loss of control primarily. This type of disorder that we're looking at, this alcoholism that the Big Book talks about, is recognizable, and they early on is established that the credibility can be established between a recovering person and a practicing person in just a few hours. They will understand that we know what they're going through because we've been through it too. And in a general sense, that's correct. In a specific sense, not so much. But we establish credibility, and there is a solution the way we establish credibility through the rest of the book, which is through stories. In terms of identity, whether it's individual identity or national identity or local or group identity or whatever, we are the stories we tell ourselves. And some of these stories are marvelous indeed. But when you get up to tell your story in an AA meeting, you're sharing your experience, strength, and hope. You're establishing credibility. And that's part of what leads into is a sales pitch. Dr. Lauflander, I can't think of his first name, wrote a book about conversion. It was titled The Doomsday Cult, and he was writing it about the Moonies. So I'm not comparing 12-step and programs, Alcoholics Anonymous, Palmer Drug Abuse Program, to the Unification Church, but some of the methodologies are somewhat similar. and not in a nefarious way. For instance, people who get involved in cult activities, things like the Unification Church, things like the Branch Davidians, and cult is something the outsiders call it. It's not something the insiders refer to. They don't run around going, "Hey, man, it's a great day in the cult today," right? It's more of a pejorative that we use. It's a religion that hadn't got a big enough membership to be called a religion yet, right? So anyway, an attraction with people is one of individualized attraction, of meeting someone, connecting with someone in the membership, and identifying with them. And that you're attracted to a person, in a sense, when you get involved in this. You're attracted to more than you are attracted to a concept. But whoever it is, your sponsor, the person who first does 12-step with you, whoever brings you the message, however you get it, it's generally, you have a situation of trust or credibility is established. You know what they're talking about, or you think you know what they're talking about, and you trust them, and you're invested in those individuals. Then you're brought in to the group, and that's where the sales pitch comes in. And the sales pitch, these are terms that I'm just referring to them as, and I'm not trying to be pejorative, but when you get in there, in your first AA meeting, someone's liable to tell you you're the most important person in the room. You're the newcomer. You're the ones that we're here for. You're the people who keep us sober because we're carrying the message and we have to give it away to keep it, right? And so come on down, get your desired chip, be one of us, etc., and so forth, which is a good idea. And like I said, I've had a lot of these desired chips and 30-day chips and 60-day chips, not a lot of other ones beyond that. But most of my chips were early day chips. And so I'm familiar with the pitch, so to speak. And come on down is a call to glory. If you go to church, they establish that you're a sinner, that you need Christ in your life. The sales pitch is, come on, is here. This is what he can do for you. You can be washed in the blood of the Lamb. Your sins will go away. Come on down. I'm not being flippant. It's the steps that you go through if you're going to convert. If you're going to make a commitment. And it's the steps that are pitched to you from the pulpit or from the speaker's dais or from the head of the classroom. This is a common thing, this particular solution. So in this chapter, they establish credibility and let you know, basically, that if you're like them, there's something you can do about it, right? Sweet. Let's see what that something is. AA aligns itself with the medical model. Surprisingly so, when you think about it. Now, it's interesting that they had Dr. Silkworth, Dr. Bob, some other people involved in this, medical people in the early days. But even in 1939, AA is, when this book is published, they've made a distinction early on between the hard drinker and the alcoholic. And they talk about it more in the chapters that are to come in the book as well, and you'll see that that's developed even more for people that are reading forward. The distinction between the hard drinker and the alcoholic is made clear, but when you get into self-identification in Alcoholics Anonymous, it is self-identification. You're an alcoholic if you say so. And if you don't think you are, that's cool with us. You're not then. The reality is, if you're an alcoholic, it doesn't matter what you think about it or what anyone else thinks about it, for that matter. You're still, addicted to the drug alcohol. But as far as AA is concerned, it's up to you to make the call. They do make the case that it's an illness, however. They also speak to the notion that there's different drinking patterns among alcoholics. And this is still a few years before Dr. Jelinek's famous Yale studies, and we'll talk about them later on in this class too, that basically outline species of alcoholics to delineate those various drinking patterns. Key to AA's understanding of the disease of alcohol dependency is paralysis of the will being a key symptom, and then loss of control being the very nature of the beast. We're unable to make our minds up to stop drinking and just stop. Willpower just doesn't seem to work for us. And there are places when we decide and make our minds up and, sign it in blood that this is what we're going to do and this is how it's going to be. But when it's time for the rubber to meet the road and we're at a critical choice point, we always choose against what we said we were going to do. We always drink again. And even today, and I've seen it lots of times, it's an amazing thing that people with everything to lose and people who are doing great in their life, they will be faced with a choice point and they relapse. And that's very much a part of all of this too. Once we start using, and this is, as I said, this is the very nature of the beast. If I could control my drinking, I probably never would have gone to the trouble of getting sober. I couldn't. So I might decide that I'll have a few drinks with some friends, and then I'll stop at 10 o'clock, or I'll only have 4 drinks or whatever, and then I'll go home. But once I start drinking, your guess is as good as mine what's going to happen next. Actually, that's, if I'm going to be totally honest, my guess is it's not going to end well. My guess is I'll drink till I can't drink anymore. There was a cartoon that used to be in the Houston Chronicle. It was in the Houston Press first, but then it was in the Chronicle. I think it ended up even in the Post, and then the Chronicle, rather, about a British guy named Andy Capp, Andycapp, and he's a little Cockney guy in Britain, and he told his friend Chalky, Chalky said, they had an opening. They opened a new pub in the neighborhood. Did you see that? And Andy said, yeah, I went to the grand opening. It was, all you could drink for free. And Chalky says, well, that sounds great, Andy. He said, well, it wasn't all that. He said, I passed out before I got all I wanted. And I could relate to that. Andy Capp, by the way, if you're familiar with Cockney speakers, they'll pronounce it handicap, which is the same way they would pronounce handicap. Handicap. But anyway, so that's kind of a double joke. Loss of control is the nature of the beast. I set out to have a couple, but then I have more and more and more. And I can't consistently predict what's going to happen when I start drinking, and that's where the loss of control comes in. Now, a problem with loss of control in drug use and alcohol use is that it indicates a pathological state of being, and once you lose this control and you have pretty much consistently lost that control, you're probably not ever going to get it back. You can underline that if you like, ever. So that can become a problem. And trying to teach people to drink responsibly has been a relatively fruitless effort over the years if they fall into this category. Now, if they're the hard drinking type, maybe you got better luck with them. But over on the alcohol side of that invisible line that the big book talks about, you can't. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. And that is about as good an explanation as I have heard for a person struggling to stop or to curtail their drinking without any assistance. Now, this does happen, and I'm not sure that it does happen so much with alcoholics, but I know it does with people who may otherwise have bad experiences with alcohol. For individuals who are not dependent on the drug, who haven't developed an addiction to it, if they get DWIs or get beaten up, or the wife decides to kick them out of the house or whatever, they moderate their behavior, rather, and they cut back or they stop altogether. And it might be, an annoyance for them. It might be a problem for them. They might not, they might have to struggle with it a little bit, but they can do it. Most people who use alcohol don't become addicted to it. Most people who even abuse alcohol don't become addicted to it. But for people who do become addicted to it, the notion that we're immune to the first drink, or that we can somehow bargain with people about our drinking behavior, is an erroneous conclusion. More about alcoholism in the second chapter. If you're like us, you'll know it. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many people pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. And this paints a pretty bleak picture of alcoholism. And alcoholism is a pretty bleak disease if you get right down to it. Any type of drug addiction is. And we see people struggle and struggle and struggle and lose to this progression. AA, again, goes into the stories. It establishes credibility as like this for us. This is what happened to Joe. This is what happened to Bob. This is what happened to Bill. This is what happened to Marty. This is what happened, and this is a very effective means of reaching people, particularly people who are still in their cups. The best time, according to AA, to approach potential new members is when they're coming off a bender, because they feel horrible and they're full of guilt, and they may be more receptive to the idea. Early AA members would go into hospitals and look up people who were being detoxed and things like that, and come in and talk to them. The message that they brought is, this is what it's like. This is how it is. This is what I did. This is what it was like for me. And again, this is what it was like. This is what happened, and this is what it's like now, is the meat and potatoes of that message. Pointing out to people incidences of loss of control and helping them see incidences of losses of control in their own drinking establishes a pattern. One DWI does not an alcoholic make. One blackout does not an alcoholic make. What we're looking for and what we're pointing out to people are patterns. This wasn't an isolated incident. This happened here and there and there and here and there and there and there and here and here and there again. It's happened over and over. It's repetitive. And it's not something that is isolated, and it's not something that's easily explained away as an anomaly in an otherwise normal life. In this particular chapter 2, they're reinforcing the idea that alcoholism is a progressive illness, that is something that once you have it, it's not going to stay in one place. Illness is any illness. If you get a cold, if you get the flu, you're going to feel like hammered hell for a while. But in most cases, within a 3-week period, you're going to be coming out of that. I mean, if you're going to come out of it, you can die with that. But you treat the symptomologies and you try to hang on till you ride it out. You get a cold, you're sick for a while, but you ride it out. You get a stomach bug, you're sick for a while, but you ride it out, you know? Other illnesses you get, you don't ride out so well. And an illness has a pathology, and you can follow it, you can measure it, you can see it in stages as it moves forward. And that's what you have with a progressive illness. As far as AA is concerned, the big book, the philosophy of Alcoholics Anonymous, alcoholism, alcohol use disorder, alcohol dependency, any moniker you want to hang on it, it is primary. It is a disease in itself and not symptomatic of underlying disorders. You're not an alcoholic because your parents made you wear hand-me-downs while you were a little boy and all your older siblings were girls. You are not an alcoholic because you didn't get a pony on your 7th birthday. You're not an alcoholic because you were potty trained improperly. You're an alcoholic because of a number of factors came together and created that condition in you. Not simply the drug itself, the agent, and not simply you, the host, but a combination of factors of the two that come together and created a multivariate syndrome that is treatable, it's diagnosable, is recognizable. We can define it. We can follow it through a pathology of stages, etc. And it responds to treatment. This illness is chronic. Once you have it, it's forever. A great analogy I heard about this. I've recited it so many times I forgot where I got it. I think it was from the AA literature and maybe the grapevine. But it's about the pickle. Y'all heard this story about the pickle? Pickles don't start out as pickles. They start out as something else. Once upon a time, a young, handsome cucumber was in his cucumber patch and living the good life. Everything was cool and groovy and wonderful and stuff like that. And then one day, not even of his own accord, someone comes along and picks him and throws him in a basket. And they take him to the pickle factory. And once he is at the pickle factory, they do some stuff to him and they transform him. Again, it's not his fault. It's not something that he intended for himself. He didn't volunteer for it. It just happened. And our young, handsome cucumber became a gnarly, knobby, old, sour pickle. You know what happens when you're a pickle? I knew you did. You can never go back to being a cucumber, ever. Never, ever again will you go back. You can put your cucumberness in the rear view. And it's that way with the drug addict as far as we know today. Now, there are people out there who are talking about harm reduction and stuff like that, and I have no problem with harm reduction things. I'm just saying that there is a certain percentage of people for whom it does not work and it will never work. And for this particular group of people, abstinence is pretty much the only thing you got. Because once you have it, it's forever. It's also progressive. It gets worse over time, and it gets worse over time even if you're not drinking. This guy I know has been around AA at least as long as I have, maybe longer, named Sonny. I like Sonny. I don't see him much, but I haven't seen him in a couple of years, several years actually, but he's a pretty cool dude. And I like his no-nonsense approach to his own recovery. And he said, I'm coming around and I'm hanging out with you guys in these meetings and we're talking about stuff and it makes me feel good and I do feel good and I'm grateful for that and I like that. But I don't want to get cocky because, if I'm thinking I'm cocky, maybe I let my guard down. And while I'm in here visiting with you guys, my disease is out in the parking lot doing push-ups and waiting on my ass, and I better be ready for it. So it's progressive. It gets worse. The symptoms advance whether you're drinking or not. In this chapter, they talk about the guy who quit for a lot of years. He just stopped drinking. He had a good reason to not drink, and he quit. And then he finishes his career, and he says, I'm doing good. I've been sober all these many years, and I think I'll drink again. And when he started drinking again, in a few weeks, it was like he had never stopped. And it is that way. Our body doesn't forget. And once we've lost control, we don't regain control through sobriety. This happens with other drugs, too. You can see narcotics addicts, for instance, twist off, and usually with the help of other drugs like alcohol and pills and stuff like that. But they can twist off of shooting up, say, for instance, not do any heroin for a while, maybe a year or two. And then when you go back, you don't have to shoot as much of it for a few weeks. Your tolerance has dropped off. But in just a short time, a very short time, you're back to where you would have been and even further. As a phenomenon that is absolutely amazing to watch in action. It's just amazing to see that happen to someone. And I don't mean amazing in a good way. I mean horrifying to see this happen to someone. And I've seen it a few times. And then finally, this is an illness that left to its own accord, it leads to fatality. It's fatal, directly or indirectly. Most people who die from alcohol dependency, who die because of alcohol dependency, don't die because they overdosed on alcohol, but they have a comorbidity like cirrhosis of the liver or something like that, or they die through misadventure, boating accident, swimming accident, fire, something along those lines, and it happens because they're intoxicated. Anyway, what kind of thinking goes into a relapse or any kind of thinking? This is explored in the second chapter we're looking at here today. There is a solution. The idea, they told a story, again, making their point with stories, about the guy who sobered up, who used to own a car lot, and now he's a salesman for the company that he used to own. And he stops at a cafe, and he has a sandwich and some food and milk, and it occurs to him that if that a shot of whiskey wouldn't hurt him if he dropped it in his milk. A shot of whiskey won't hurt me if I drop it in my milk. What could possibly go wrong? Everything. Everything could go wrong. Craig Ferguson, and I may post this for you to look at some point, back a few years back when Tiffany, what's her name? Britney Spears, that's her name, was going into rehab, getting her head shaved and all that kind of stuff, and having a very public meltdown, mental meltdown. Ferguson went on air and said he wasn't going to make any Britney Spears jokes because he did not want it on it, did not want to be the last comic to tell a joke on her before she died because she was clearly in trouble. But he told his story, and one of the things he said that really spoke to me was that he saw that Guinness had released a new ale that only had like 110 calories in it. And he said, 110 calories, what could possibly go wrong? I had that same thing when I was a couple of years sober, and I saw that, and Craig Ferguson was sober, by the way, it's his 15 year. He was sober 15 years at that point. I read a piece of literature. I don't know where I came across it. Something I collect a bunch of weird information, but said that transcendental meditation would, if you got into that, it would, help with your health and your diet, and it even help you control your drinking and things like that. And I thought, really? I can meditate and drink? And this is after I'm sober. That's alcoholic thinking. Again, and you'll hear me say this a bunch of times probably because it's important. If your idea of normal is being able to use a drug and get away with it, you ain't normal. You're just not. Normal people don't think that way. People who are overly invested in their drug and drug-using behavior, we're the ones who think that way. This chapter also talks about the guy who has the passion for jaywalking. And this is illustrating what we come to know as the insanity of alcohol, right? He likes to get out in the street, and he likes to cross against the light, and he likes to cross in heavy traffic. He gets a rush out of it, and people are looking at him going, this dude's kind of weird, And then he gets hit, and he breaks his leg. And you think, well, surely he'll stop now. But no, tomorrow he's out there on his crutches, and now he gets hit, and he breaks the other leg. That'll teach him. He'll quit now. But no, he's out there again tomorrow on his crutches, and then he gets hit and breaks his arm and can't use his crutches anymore. Surely he's done with it now, but no, he's out there again in his wheelchair with one arm going in a circle, kind of. The point is, he's engaged in a self-defeating and self-damaging behavior that he can't control. He can't stop. And he doesn't even pretend like at this stage of the game that it's healthy, normal, or anything else. He knows good and damn well that what he's doing isn't normal, isn't healthy, isn't right, and isn't going to end well, but he can't stop doing it. That is compulsion. Obsession is to thinking what compulsion is to chosen behavior, and both of them are what a bottle rocket is to a thermonuclear warhead to a bottle rocket. You can say that they're rockets, but the intensity is entirely different. The actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly any exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. Boy, when I read that the first time, my heart sank. I mean, it sank. I'm going, yeah, I'm doomed, if I can't stop after I know about this stuff, how will it happen? How will I make a recovery from this? My sponsor said that sign on the wall, think, 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 it's not for new guys. And I complicated things. People tend to complicate things. Alcoholics Anonymous tends to uncomplicate things, really. Where was I? Yeah. My ex-wife, my late ex-wife, she passed away a few years ago. You know what I think's wrong with alcoholics, she said, when you get right down to it. Alcoholics just can't seem to see what's clearly obvious to everyone else. And the kitty cat looks into the mirror and sees a tiger. But he's a kitty cat. I have unreal self-image of myself. I see myself in ways that aren't consistent with how I really am. And that is a big problem for drinkers. And what we do as counselors, and what AA does, a thing that I picked up pretty early on in AA, is that it's a house of mirrors, and everybody's holding one up to you, and you're able to see what's in the mirror because it's reflected back to you all the time. And if you're honest with yourself, that's a good thing. And if you're dishonest with yourself, it can be a misery. They lead us to the conclusion, and I think that this chapter ended with that, that we couldn't do it for ourselves, that we needed something else. And that brings us to we agnostics. Laura Nyro, a songwriter from back in the 60s, penned the song that was done by Blood, Sweat, and Tears in the early 70s called When I Die. And when I'm dead and gone, there'll be one child born in the world to carry on. That's her quote. I swear there ain't no heaven, and I pray there ain't no hell, but you never know by living, it's only by dying you'll tell. Whither higher power? Do we need a power greater than ourselves? That's the claim that the Big Book makes, that we need a power greater than ourselves. And though a lot of the founding members of AA were people of faith and were people who I'll spit it out here in a minute, and people who had studied religion, gone to church, were religious people, there were plenty of them who were totally turned off by religion, didn't believe in it, were atheists and agnostics, and that happens. I mean, I remember having a conversation with a guy one day, and I was just ranting about how religion never did anything for me, that I'd gone to church and all of this, and, and still things didn't work out for me. And just, it's just tirade, old drunk's tirade. But the guy looked at me and kind of smirked a little bit. Pissed me off when I think about it, actually. But he said, you know what? He said, you say you don't believe in God, right? I said, right. And then he said, then why are you so pissed off at him? That pulled me up. I still have to think about that sometimes. AA goes Buddhist. Buddhism doesn't tell you which God to believe in. Buddhism doesn't tell you to believe in any God. Buddhism doesn't direct you in a religious way that way. Buddhism is more universal. So pick a God, any old God I want, yeah, maybe, I don't know. AA doesn't prescribe that. It doesn't say believe in our God, but get a God of your own understanding. The point of it is that you find a power greater than yourselves, and that's what the higher power is about. And I've had people, heard people say that that their higher power is G-O-D, as God, good orderly direction. The higher power is the group consciousness. The higher power is, whatever. And so AA is not picky about that. In fact, it comes down to the notion that basically we need to know who God ain't. And that was something I learned from my sponsor Buzz in Oxnard, California, back in 1982. Look, either there is a God or there isn't, and our opinions won't change that. If there is a God, he doesn't need us, and we're the ones who need the humility. Maybe nice to know who God is, but it's more important to know who he ain't. And brother, he ain't you. I think Buzz was absolutely correct about that. Group consciousness, maybe, but I just need to know who God ain't. And if there is a higher power out there, he probably doesn't need me. I, on the other hand, could probably use him. And if I can talk for very long at all about humility, I don't have it, so I won't even go there. But group consciousness is a source of strength and higher power. We can do what I cannot, and that's a key message that's in Alcoholics Anonymous, and up to this point, and it's being reinforced here in this chapter, that there is a source of strength, that there is strength in unity, that we can do what I cannot. That can go south on you sometimes. I mean, the Branch Davidians believed that. The Branch Davidians believed in group consciousness. The Branch Davidians believed in their fearless leader, David Koresh. And things didn't end well for them. Didn't end well for Jim Jones and his People's Temple, and so groups can sicken and they can die, and do. But the overall movement of Alcoholics Anonymous marches forward. Again, let me say, I'm not trying to be disparaging or compare them. I'm not saying Bill Wilson was anything like David Koresh or Jim Jones. What I'm saying is that, the same mechanisms can fall into place with groups. I wrote a book back in the 90s called Soldiers of God, White Supremacists and Their Holy War for America. And one of the guys that I met during this process was a guy named Kerry Noble. And he was a very religious fellow. And he got hooked up with an organization called Covenant Sword and the Arm of the Lord. And they were a bunch of fundamentalist Christians, evangelical Christians, who wanted to live and worship together and all that good stuff. And they took the Bible and the teachings of Jesus and moved up into the Ozark Mountains with Jim Ellison, who at one point was referred to as King James of the Ozarks. And they started prophesying to each other. And when they cut off all outside sources of information, all outside influences, rejected everything that they heard that was against what they were telling one another, what they were preaching, then they became dangerous to themselves and to other people too. AA has been compared to a cult, and I have heard people refer to it as an organization that teaches fear. They teach people to be afraid of drinking, and I'm of two minds about that. Yeah, they kind of do teach you to be afraid of drinking because they point out the obvious to you. They take Leslie's advice and point out what everyone can see but you, it seems like, and let you know how dangerous it is for you to do that. It's perfectly okay to be afraid of petting crocodiles. It's perfectly okay to be afraid of crossing the freeway at rush hour. You should be. But we'll talk about that again in another context. Faith without works is dead, they tell you. And what you learn at this stage of the game, if you're paying attention in your big book studies, is that we have to tap into this source of power. We have to utilize it. We have to surrender to win. And the way we do that is we quit fighting alcohol. We give up. We don't get in the ring with it. We ask our higher power for guidance, if that's the group or our sponsors or whoever it is or God or whatever. And we walk the walk. We help to work with other alcoholics. This is something that's reinforced throughout this text, is that when all else fails, carry the message to another drunk. It'll help you. It'll keep you sober. And to remember, of course, that love's a verb. It's something that you do. It's not something that you feel or talk about or any of that stuff. But we struggle between our reason and what logic tells us and what seems reasonable to us and what people of faith tell us. I don't know if these nights really represent that. I just grabbed some clip art. But Soren Kierkegaard was a great Christian existentialist philosopher. And like I told you, Bill Wilson was classically educated. He knew a good deal about philosophy. And he quotes a lot of philosophers in there. He quotes William James and his variety of religious experiences in this particular chapter. He doesn't quote Kierkegaard, but he talks about some notions that Kierkegaard advanced. And that's there are two knights that are jousting. He uses this analogy. One's the knight of faith, and the other is the knight of reason. And both of them are constantly trying to unseat the other, and they live inside all of us. Kierkegaard, and please don't hear this as pejorative, Kierkegaard says that if you're going to be a Christian, you have to embrace the absurd. And how do you embrace the absurd? Well, you're a smart person. You know that someday you're going to die. And when you do, you're going to lose everything. You're going to lose everyone. And that's going to be that. So in your mind, your reason tells you this. No one comes back from that. But the knight of faith tells you that you have to believe that you're going to lose everything, everyone, and get it all back, and then some. And that's what faith is, that there's something that lies beyond, and that there's something out there that you can tap into and contact with, and it's going to be transformative. It's going to change you. For Christians, it's God. For Muslims, it's God. For Buddhists, it's God. For Hindus, it's God. These are the things that you tap into that are transformative, and that there is a world beyond our world, and it's not just something that's academic that will sit down at Starbucks and discuss over coffee, but it's something that's real, tangible, you can tap into, and is transformative. AA is just not going to tell you what to call it. Remember in our last discussion, I said that AA was kind of like the Church of the Unknown God. Nobody hangs a name on it, but it's kind of religious in nature in the way that it believes and does things. And anyway, I choose not to quibble today over the difference between spiritual and religious. Religion is doing things in a prescribed manner. Spirituality is having a belief system and participating in that system. In these 3 chapters, in conclusion, the big book makes its case that alcoholics are ill and that they suffer from a hopeless condition of mind and body, and that this condition leads to obsession and loss of control in areas of drinking. Just between you and me, if you sober up an alcoholic or a drug addict, you discover that there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on with that individual apart from the drinking and drugging behavior. You scratch an alcoholic and you'll find shining underneath that exterior level of skin a person with an intimacy disorder, a person who has poor impulse control, a person who engages in womanizing and things like that, or manizing, as the case may be, or you may be, omnimizing and just going for anything. I don't know. Anyway, so there are other things that emerge when we sober up. There's always a new challenge for us. It also leads to the conclusion that there's a spiritual solution to this condition, and preparation prior to the execution of a program of recovery is to follow. We haven't even heard the first step yet, but they're making a case that this is what's going on with the drinker, this is where they are, this is what needs to happen next. So let me get out of this and back over here, and I'll say to you that we can, this isn't a big book study. This isn't the way that they hold it down at the AA Club, particularly. Some of these issues may be talked about, but if you were in a big book study, they'd probably be asking you things about, well, did this apply to you in your life? Do you see yourself here anywhere? How was this for you when you did this? And it's still we're still in the part of the book that's about self-identification and helping us to see that this is a program that is for us. And it's a program of attraction. It's not one of promotion, particularly. Or as I had it told to me, this is a recovery program for people who want it. It's not necessarily for people who need it. A lot of people need it, but they don't want it. So. And AA itself has taken the position that, we'll use anything. We'll use psychiatry, medicine, you name it. If religion, if it's got something to offer to make us better people, then that is what we'll do. I'm a very fortunate guy in a lot of ways. I was fortunate I had good sponsors and people to show me, the ropes and leave me alone. And they gave me some information, and I'm very grateful to Carrie Levin, a sponsor of mine that used to work for Palmer Drug Abuse Program here in the greater Houston area, actually in Pasadena, and in the 1980s. He told me something, and I pick up, like I said, little snippets of information and things like that, and sometimes make them my own. But he passed on something to me that I'll pass on to you that you can pass on to other people too. Just between us. The 12 steps aren't there to fill you up, ladies and gentlemen. They're there to make you hungry. And I hope you have an appetite. See you later.